All right, welcome back, everybody. Now, Floyd Shivambu, the EFF Deputy President, gave an Africa Day lecture at the University of the Free State in Bloemfontein this past weekend. In his address, Shivambu said Africa needs a new generation that will lead Africa towards total economic emancipation. The EFF happens to be a party whose membership constitutes mainly young people. It would be interesting to hear what decisive programs it has to steer the youth of this country. And what happens to be today, we've got lots of young girls that are in studio with us this morning. They're all coming to watch and see as South Africa embarks on this Take a Girl Child to Work campaign. So it'll be great to see what the EFF have for the youth in some of their policies. Floyd Shivambu, he's here. He's the deputy of the Economic Freedom Fighters. So good to see you. Welcome to Morning Live.
No, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for visiting us. All right, so let's start off with, it is Africa Day today. So you gave the lecture in Bloem at the UFS University. Talk to us about the message that you were conveying about Africa Day.
Now look, we utilized the lecture to give a broad overview of what the Africa Day is all about, that it's about the Congress that formed the Organization of African Unity back 54 years ago, and then they provided a critique that whilst there have been so many progressive things that were conducted by the OAU, we have had post-colonial disasters and tragedies that happened post-colonial rule here in the African continent. We have had so many sad stories of God presidents, of presidents that do not want to leave political power, of individuals who turned their countries into their personal projects. So we're giving a deeper critique of what has happened since 1963 when the OAU was formed, but also made a call that we need a continent-wide economic emancipation movement. Because when the OAU was formed in 1963, it constituted something called the Liberation Committee, which was about the total emancipation from colonialism of the entire continent. But there wasn't a clearer focus of what happens post-colonialism. Most of the African states and countries were unable to constitute proper governments and state and institutions, the judiciary and separation of powers that could have sustained their countries for a very long time.
Yeah.
It just became some sense of presidentialism, where a president's word is the be-all and end-all of all affairs in that particular country. And there was not even a real economic development that got to include and empower as many people as possible, because there wasn't a continent pan-African-wide economic coordination that got to empower as many Africans as possible.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at colonialism, which is very much so at the heart of what you speak about as a party as well, and trying to blame a lot of the ills, which is in fact true to a certain extent on colonialism. What do we do though? Somehow we need to be seen to also lead and take responsibility and accountability. What will it take for us to actually move on from colonialism?
Look, we're currently experiencing a phenomenon of neocolonialism in the entire African continent. It's actually worse in the Francophone states, where some of the countries that were colonized by France are still paying for the colonial taxes. Their currency and central banks are still intricately linked to France in terms of what happens. So France determines what happens in majority of its former colonies. So we've got a phenomenon of neocolonialism, that the former colonial masters are still in control of Africa's resources. They are still in ownership of our land. They are still in charge of our languages, of our cultural perceptions, and what we do in the continent. So we need to develop a new vision, a Pan-African vision that seeks to drive about real economic cooperation and Pan-African trade that will say that African countries must begin to trade amongst themselves so that we collectively develop ourselves. But what happens currently in the continent is that all of us are almost dependent on the former colonial masters. We trade with them, we rely on them for virtually everything. They own our land, they own our technology, they own our systems. They give us finished goods and services when they take almost all our natural resources and products and bring them as finished goods and services. And that is one of the things that constituted the founding ideology of the economic freedom fighters, to say that Let us reclaim our land. Let us reclaim our mineral resources. Let us drive a continent-wide Pan-African development and economic cooperation that is going to inspire hope in terms of how we get to move forward.
Yeah. And, one of the things, however, is during the lecture, you actually spoke about a couple of African leaders, and those that you named, Thomas Sankara, Eduardo Mondlane, Patrice Lumumba, Muammar Gaddafi, and so on. How do you link them to a progressive Africa when many of them are plagued by controversies themselves?
No, look, I spoke about the heroes of the African continent, those that have played a significant role in the decolonization movement. I spoke about Haile Selassie, about Julius Nyerere, about Thomas Sankara, about Patrice Lumumba, about Muammar Gaddafi, about Kwame Nkrumah. I spoke about Eduardo Mondlane. And in some instances, I illustrated that whilst most of these heroes who have been generally praising, some of them have had weaknesses. But I also spoke about what we characterize as the post-colonial disasters. I spoke about Mobutu Sese Seko. I spoke about Idi Amin. I spoke about Sani Abacha of Nigeria. I spoke about Jacob Zuma of South Africa as part of the post-colonial disasters that come to define a country alongside their personal interest. And I spoke about what are the common characteristics of the post-colonial disasters in the continent, that in majority of cases they do not respect institutions. They combine their personal wealth with state wealth. They always promote their family members. Check what is happening in Equatorial Guinea, where the son of the president is a vice president, is the richest person in Equatorial Guinea. Check what is happening in Angola. The daughter of the president is the richest person in Angola, and she's intricately linked to the control of the oil reserves in Angola. Check what is happening in Cameroon. Paul Biya has been in power since 1982, and his family is the richest in that particular country. So these are some of the issues that we're highlighting to those that were speaking to at the University of the Free State, that whilst we celebrate the glorious history of the Organization of African Unity, we've had post-colonial disasters, and we as a generation should discontinue such realities. But I also spoke about President Mugabe, that whilst we could celebrate President Mugabe, his overstay in power is totally unacceptable. We will never celebrate, as this generation, God presidents who stay in power forever. He is 92 years old. There is no value that he can add to the people of Zimbabwe. He must give to a new generation that will come with new ideas and new forms and take the struggle forward. We appreciate the correct land reform and land redistribution program that happened in Zimbabwe, but a president must not stay in power forever. And liberation movements, when they do not perform well, they must leave office. We also said, importantly, that we want to thank all the liberation movements for a job well done in terms of fighting against colonialism, but now we're going to gauge them in terms of the real value that they bring about economic emancipation, about empowering people's lives. And if they do not do that, they must leave power, and then they must give power to the new generation that will bring about freedom.
The land reforms that happened in Zimbabwe. And we see what Zimbabwe looks like now, and we see so many of our neighbors fleeing across into South Africa in search of a better life, and it doesn't always work out that way. But you look at Zimbabwe and you look at the state that it's in, and many attribute it to the land policies that President Robert Mugabe instituted in the incorrect manner in which he did it. Do you still believe that what he did was the right thing to do, and you'd like to see that done here in South Africa?
Now look, the principle that we have always maintained as the EFF is that all land of Africans must be taken from settlers and be given to the African majority. So any program that reclaims land from the colonial settlers to give to Africans, we support. But we do not support political leadership that stays in power on a scarecrow that the colonialists are the ones who are changing them from political power. So that is one thing that we always associate with. So associate with the radical land redistribution program. And it must be done in a way that ultimately empowers as many people as possible. But it looks like in Zimbabwe, land was taken from white farmers to the Politburo of ZANU-PF in some instances. And in South Africa, what we aspire is to expropriate land without compensation and give it to the state, which is going to equally redistribute it to make sure that each and every South African who needs to utilize land for industrial purposes, for agricultural purposes, for recreational purposes, for human settlement, is given equal access to land, not the currently skewed land ownership patterns where the colonial settlers are the majority land owners and they got it through illegal means of colonial conquest and defeat of our forefathers.
Yeah. I want to also just touch a little bit on the EFF's policies, and I did introduce this to say we'd touch on it. Particularly, you look at a party like the EFF, which is, I mean, when you look at the base of it, it is attracting the youth, and it is a young party. What are the policies that you have in place to better the lives of the youth? Because it seems at this point that they are the most disgruntled members of our society.
Look, everything else that the EFF speaks about is about empowering the youth. It's about empowering the current generation to gain meaningful access to economic participation. We speak about provision of free quality education for all. That is about empowering the youth to be able to take charge of their future. When we speak about the return of the economy to the hands of our people from the neo-colonialists, it's about empowering young people. When we speak about massive industrial expansion, it's about creating jobs for young people. So everything else that the EFF speaks about everywhere, every day, it's about empowering young people so that they've got sustainable futures. We do not want to be trapped in the situations that they were inherited in 1994. If you check the developments of many African countries, is that they've been post-colonial 50 years ago, but there's not been real development that impacts on people. Instead, they've been regressing in terms of what happens. So the EFF is coming with this radical and clear economic emancipation program that is going to take South Africa forward, take the entire continent forward, so that young people of today become better citizens and better adults of tomorrow.
Okay. Can I talk politics a little bit with you?
Yeah,
now,
no
away
problem.
for current day politics. Any news from the Constitutional Court? What's happening with this ballot, the secret ballot?
Now look, we're confident as the EFF that the Constitutional Court is going to rule in the favor of the case that we took to the Constitutional Court. Is going to grant the secret ballot, and then we're going to table a motion of no confidence against Jacob Zuma, and majority of members of parliament are going to vote him out as a president of the Republic of South Africa. He can remain as ANC president, but will be voted out as a president of the Republic of South Africa because a bigger number of members of parliament from all political parties are beginning to appreciate what we have been saying as the EFF throughout, that we are sitting with a post-colonial disaster who undermines the state institutions, who is utilizing the Gupta family to loot the state resources, who is undermining all the state-owned companies. Look at what is happening in Eskom, in Dinel. Look what he did in Transnet. Look what he does everywhere else where he touches. Like he has personalized state power, and South Africa must save itself from this post-colonial disaster.
So you're very confident that if the secret ballot comes in and the constitutional votes in that favor, that you will get some of the ANC MPs voting against him?
I think to say confident is an understatement.
Okay.
We know.
You know it's going to happen.
We know that once the secret ballot is granted, Jacob Zuma is no more as the president of South Africa.
Yeah. And just finally, congratulations on your wedding, by the way, and your marriage. How are things at home when you are married to an ANC supporter and you are EFF?
No, she doesn't have political affiliation. I think there was a fake news that ran around.
Was that
about
fake news?
Yeah.
Okay, so she's not an ANC
No,
member.
she doesn't have any political affiliation.
All right, but I'm sure you'd convince her
But
otherwise. If
thanks,
not.
yes, yeah.
Floyd, look after yourself. Thank you very much for being with us here, talking to us about the significance of Africa Day. And you've been tweeting a lot as well. But Palesa, I'm going to hand it over to you just to talk to us about some of the tweets that have been coming in, talking Africa Day, what it means to you.